started to remove myself. And this was about 12 years after Dad died. This is when I really had my big realization as to what had happened. And it was my starting point of being introduced to life coaching and what life coaching was and how different that is versus therapy and counseling and those kind of things. So way different, right? So that's when I started to really dive in as to what had happened and what all this was. And of course, over all this time too, I didn't marry that person I was engaged to, and I had just kind of relationship hopped, like one bad relationship into another. Like that first guy was in a relationship with and engaged to, alcoholic, but I was always trying to save him. I was always trying to save people. What can I do to save people, others, but drowning myself?
Yes.
And completely not thinking about who Stacy is, what she wants. Any move I made was for other people.
Yeah.
Constantly. Like
what you were trained to do.
Exactly. And then so bad relationship after bad relationship. Longest one being 7 years, and that's when I had moved back and forth in all of this time across Canada a couple of different times. The longest I've stayed as an adult is Manitoba, like where I am now, and I'm 10 years here. So I come to Manitoba in 2014. And I ended up meeting this guy when I was living out east, and he was from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and he convinced me to move to Winnipeg, Manitoba. Well, that relationship almost was the end of Stacy. Like I ended up being put into such a mindset and such bad negative thoughts. I thought, if he doesn't kill me, I'm going to end up killing myself. Like literally, if he doesn't do me in, I can't take this anymore. Like I'm going to do myself in. So
How
here I
long were
was.
you with him?
7 years.
Oh yeah. Man, that's a lot of time. So how did you know that it was time to get out?
Okay, that's a really good question. So in 2019, excuse me, back up, September 2018, ended up bankrupt over $55,000 of
Oh,
choices that I would have never in a million years put myself in alone. Like the financial stuff it was just credit card. It was stupid. It wasn't even a house. It wasn't even a car. It was credit card debt and loan,
yeah.
like line of credit, like just really
Right.
dumb purchases, right? But all because I would be guilted into, well, you don't love me if you don't buy me this, or
Yeah.
well, you don't love me if you don't go on this trip. Oh, and all of that. But I didn't love myself enough to know that that was wrong. But
It's hard
that,
to set boundaries when you're in a relationship like that, because you have to first fill your own cup. And if your cup has been dry for so long, it's easy to take on in these little love bombs or whatever you call them are easy to fill your cup of not worthy substances
exactly.
that evaporate in thin air as soon as they hit the bottom. They're
Exactly. To the point where this man used my dad's death and tried to create a narrative around that and around my family that was so false. But I got to this point, and 2018 ended up bankrupt. And if you've ever gone through that journey, it is the most demoralizing, embarrassing journey ever. I never wish out my worst enemy to ever go through that again. It was terrible for me. It was so bad. Lowest of the low I felt. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I'm just going to get to the end of this bankruptcy because we had to file as a family, and he had 2 kids that we had like fought custody of and all of this. So I had 2 stepchildren at that point in time that were about
You
11 and
guys were
12.
not married, correct?
No, thank
Okay.
heavens. Thank goodness. And I never had kids with any of these bad relationships. I don't have children at all. So that's a little bit further on down the road. This man actually influenced me highly to have a full hysterectomy because he didn't want any more children. I will say that there was a bit of it there was a health concern, but had I got a second opinion from a different doctor, I probably wouldn't have had a full hysterectomy.
Oh
I
my
would have
goodness.
just had the fibrosis cyst removed. and that would have been it.
Oh wow.
So that was
Hold on, because that's a lot right there, because that's your future that he took control of at that point, was your future.
yes,
Whether he was in it or not. So he was controlling you. Like right now, he's still controlling your life by that one action.
yeah.
And then a doctor that would actually sign on for this is a whole other story as well, because fibroids can be helped.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways, but wow, that's
So that was May of 2018. May 18th of 2018. And I had canceled this surgery. Like I had gone for my consult in like 2017, fall of 2017, and I'd booked it and canceled like 3 or 4 times, like to the point where the receptionist was like, if you don't follow through with this, we're not going to have you as a patient. Like I felt very,
bullied.
but yes, that's probably the good word, like very, very, very bullied into doing this, because the percentage of cancer that the doctor gave me was extremely low, and there was no real test to show that that was what's going to happen if it didn't go through with
Right.
this or whatever. There wasn't real strong enough evidence. If I think back to it, if I really think back to that time, there wasn't a super strong enough evidence to say that. So this guy had 6 kids of his own already. At that point in time in May of 2008, I only knew about 4. There was 2 others that came out after the fact that were older, and their mother had kept them away from this guy, like really, he didn't even really know he was their father for quite a long time. Anyway, so this guy was just a complete piece of POS, like literally,
Shit. I will say
literally.
it for you. He was a piece of shit.
Yes. So I did 7 years of just
Hard
the
time.
mental
It's 7 years
anguish.
of hard time.
Exactly, exactly. Totally jailed up. And then 2019 rolled around. And I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. Like, I'm losing my mind. He had me to the point where I just didn't believe I didn't trust myself and
Right.
nothing. And like I said, he had this whole narrative around my family that was so false, like so false. And I was believing it because, like, at points, if you've ever dealt with anyone narcissistic, it's really terrible, and they just really play with your mind, and they do it so slow. They do it a
Very
really,
manipulative. So they do
oh
it
yeah,
very strategically. And I don't know that they do it strategically on their part, because I don't think that they um know what they're
that's
doing. They just know that they're not getting the results that they want. So therefore they switch gears and they do this and this and this, because it is always 100% about them and only them.
2019. Like it was another like really transformational year. But before I get into that detail, I need to back up of 3 more years. I forgot one really integral part. So 2016, July of 2016,
Mhm.
my closest uncle on my mom's side, who had taken that role of dad for me after I lost my dad for all of those years, like kind of, he didn't have any kids, but he was like always was my favorite uncle, and we were always very close. And when I had moved to Alberta in 2005, I had lived with him, and we got pretty close. So in 2016, unfortunately, he committed suicide.
Oh wow.
So there was some hidden stuff there that we'll never know why, because he was, the true stereotypical case of that, where he didn't show any signs of struggle to anyone, and like the least expected person of that.
Right.
um However, the reason I mentioned that before I finish off with that, with the narcissistic relationship part of it, was that funeral, that man I was with would not let me go by myself to
Mm.
that funeral. So that was 2 provinces west of us, and he made me take him with me to go. And then also during the funeral, he wouldn't come to the funeral with me, but during the funeral, he kept texting me the whole entire time to hurry up, that he was leaving and he was going to leave without me. So, had I opened up to my family at that time, there was never going to be a way that I was leaving with him. But I hid a lot of things as
Right.
per usual, right? Making it look like everything was rosy. And I thought I was doing a good job at hiding what was going on. But lo and behold, of course, we don't. Everyone around us knows more than we think they know, those kind of things.
Right.
So then 2019 rolled, or 2018 had come, and I ended up bankrupt over ridiculous things. And then 2019, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I have to get out of this. But the bankruptcy was only supposed to be 6 months. So my goal was like, okay, when I hit the 6 month mark, which would have been like, I think April, that's it. I'm out. Like, peace out, buddy. Like, I'm done with all of this. Like, I cannot do this anymore. Well, I had kind of told him along the way, like, I just can't do this anymore. Like, this is not happy for me. I'm terribly like sick. Like, I was pretty sick too at that point. Like, I have diabetes. It was pretty, blood sugars out of whack. Like, just was not feeling well at all. Mental health was declining regularly because of all this. So, he in January of 2019 turned around and he had some investments, but the bankruptcy trustee had said for that year, don't touch those investments, because if you do, you're going to have to report that as income, and that's going to make your bankruptcy longer than 9 months. So it originally would have been 9 months. Sorry, yes, it originally would have been 9 months, but then he went behind my back and took out this money.
So
And
longer.
And it made it 18 months to begin with.
Wow, doubled it.
So because he knew that I was, and now thinking about that as I'm like verbalizing this out loud, he knew I was going to leave.
Right.
So that was probably like just another tact of like, there's another thing,
Any
another
way to keep her to stay.
Yeah, exactly. So then by I think it was March or April of 2019, I seeked out counseling for myself. So I went, found a counselor that I could go on my lunch hour that he wouldn't find out about. So I paid a counselor until he did find out about it. So he did find out, and then he
How
insisted
long
on
had you been going to the counselor before he found out?
I think a month. Yes, I think I had 3 or 4 sessions, and then he ended up finding out. And
How
he
did he
found out,
find out?
well, during bankruptcy, you have to report and you have to provide like a
Okay, where
monthly
the money's
budget
going.
where the money's going. So I had to
Yeah.
write that down. And he found it, like, he realized it at that point. So then he insisted on, because I had purposely found one that was close to my work I could walk to, take my, and my boss even knew what was going on. Like, my boss at that time was absolutely incredible. He knew what was going on. I was really supportive of it. He didn't like him. He was like, you do need to do whatever you need to do to get away from this man. Like, we're here for you however we can. And if that means that we just give you a little extra time on lunch to get there and back, like, do what you got to do, right? And I was the office manager at this point too. So I had a little bit more flexibility with that, because I could make it up other ways, right?
Right.
So then when he found out about that, he would come to my office, pick me up, supposed to be on time, never was, and drive me to my appointment. So he would control it. We didn't have 2 vehicles. We only had 1 vehicle, and it was his vehicle, but I paid for everything. Insurance, gas. He didn't work. Like, this man never held a job steady the whole entire time I was with him. So I supported him, plus his 2 teenage kids that we shared 50-50 custody with. So I was like the provider of everything. So then when he did that, what he would do then would be, at the end of my sessions, he knew how long they were. I would text him, like, when I was coming down the building, and then he would like play these games, like cat and mouse games of like, oh, well, I'm on this street, come meet me over here. Oh, I'm over here. And he would just constantly move the car just to intentionally make me late again for work. So he would do like really crazy things like that. And then so I put myself, like, I say I really did my exit strategy for leaving that relationship for about a full year before I actually left, almost a full year. So by the time I had started into the counseling and everything, And then in February of 2020, I had like he had really just messed around with my head and didn't pick me up from work one day, made me walk in really cold temperatures from the bus stop, got to the house, he locked me out of the house,
Mm.
wouldn't let me in, like, and his son, who was at that point 12, I think, was like, Dad, let her in, it's cold. And he's on the other side of the door yelling at me and yelling at the kids to not let me in. So that was my wake up call when I finally got in the house. And I was just like, man, I'm not only hurting myself, but now these kids are seeing it. Like, and these kids don't deserve to see this. And they don't deserve any of this. Like, they were amazing. Like, I've said to my current boyfriend, who, I've said to him, like, there could become a time when these kids get older that they come and look for me, because I was an integral
Yeah.
part of their life. I no longer have any communication with them now, but that day I just knew, that was a Thursday night, and I just knew I could not do this anymore. I just couldn't do it. So Friday, like somewhere between that Thursday night and Friday, I packed a bag, and Friday morning I did not take them to school. So Friday morning was going to be their switch off day to go back to their mom. So I knew that they wouldn't see anything that weekend or whatever, because they would be out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. Well, not out of mind, but definitely out of the harm's way.
Sure.
Right. So there was that. And then when I left, like that Friday morning, when he went to take the kids to school, he had the kids come and hug me, and his son, was like 12 at the time, whispered in my ear, and he said, because his dad said, well, you better hug her, because that's the last time you're going to see her. That's probably the last time you're going to see her, because she says she's leaving us and she doesn't love you guys, and la 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 la. Like, he was just like really terrible. He would do that to them all the time,
Yeah.
though. Like, he constantly did those things, but this time he was like really like, well, you better make sure you give her a good hug, because you're never going to see her again. And if anybody knows anything about a dark side of a narcissist, that is extremely scary. And
Yeah.
the point that we were at, I was like, in my head, I was like, over my dead body, you're gonna have to freaking do a whole lot of kicking and screaming, because I thought, oh my gosh, he's gonna take me out. Like,
Yeah.
I was like at the point where I thought he was gonna kill me. I really did. Like, I thought he was gonna do something, go off the deep end and do something. I didn't know what it was gonna be, but that's what I felt. So he said that, and this young Aaron comes and he hugs me, and he says, whispers in my ear, Faith, and he says, Stacy, I know you're a good person. I love you, and I know what Dad says is not true.
Oh.
Like, this kid could see this. So that was kind of my solid ground of, I need to go, because if this kid is seeing this, I need to give these children hopefully a chance to not see these things, and maybe their mom can fight for full custody again.
Right.
So there was that. And then when we talk about grief, and when we talk about loss, like, there was another loss again. So here I had gone all of these years trying to fill a loss, trying to fill that void. And I was finding myself in these terrible, hurtful relationships over and over again, either cheating, like the guys would cheat on me, or they would just use me for, like, basically the whole theory of like use and abuse and screw with your head and those kind of things, right? So 2020 rolls around, I did that, I left. I'm so grateful that I left. I literally feel like that was like God's hand came down on my shoulders and is like, I got you. Just lead with me, like, walk with me. I've got you. I'll protect you. And it was a very scary month. Like, there was one full month where it was very terrifying, because I was still in the house that we shared, and he wouldn't give me back his key. So I ended up going as far as changing the locks, and at the end of it, I ended up moving, so he didn't know where I was. So the reason that's an integral part of my grief is because I not only had to grieve, I was still grieving, my dad. That's a grief that will never go away. Like, that is something that every holiday, every birthday of his, every Father's Day, it stings.
Every time a truck passes. Yes.
That part for a long time, definitely. But that part now, I'm just like, oh yeah. When I hear a nice truck, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a nice truck. But that's a little bit better now. But yes, for like the first 12 years, it would be and I was from a huge trucking community. Like that was just we seen trucks all the time. But
Right.
in particularly the company that my dad was hauling that trailer for, when I seen those trucks go in the spring of
Mm,
the year,
that would make sense.
because that was like the company he was driving for. Those trucks were
And
always
the time of
are
the
always
year, and it's, like, very close. Yes, I get that.
that part was is always still to this day quite triggering. Um so anyway, but 2020 rolls around, I leave this relationship and I'm like, okay, what next? So I go and I get my own apartment that he doesn't know about, but I'm surrounded by things that I had with him and I only bought because of him. So I go on this huge purge cleanse. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, I sold everything, even when it come down to clothing. Like, if I had a pair of socks that I think that he gave me, I got rid of them. Like, that's how bad it was. Like, it was literally like I need to get rid of anything that when I look at it, I feel that there was so much emotional attachment to that.
Mhm.
But it wasn't good emotional attachment, obviously.
No, no,
It was
no, but that's how he bonded you to him, was the emotions.
yeah, so I got rid of everything and like totally cleansed out as much as I could. There's a few things that I got over that part with, and I'm kind of grateful I didn't get rid of because I had some nice things. I did have some nice
Yeah.
things. There's a couple things that I didn't. But anyway, so then in 2020, then the pandemic hit. So that here we are, like literally a month. I left February 12th and the world shut down March 13th.
Mhm.
So here I was
Good
alone.
thing you got out when you did.
Exactly, because had I not, I for sure would not be talking to you today. I for sure would not be talking to you today.
Right.
And so here I was, completely alone in Winnipeg, Manitoba, which, if you know anything about Canada, we are twin sisters to Chicago.
Okay.
So think
I
of
know
and
Chicago, but I don't know Manitoba.
right, but okay, so if you think of Chicago, think of a street or an area like a neighborhood in Chicago where you would never go because you know that that's the worst of the worst, right? Well,
Mhm.
that's where I lived for 7 years, like in the depths of the worst of where you could
Mm.
be in this city, and which is totally not me. Like, I had no reason to be there, but that's where he wanted to be. And he would say, like, oh, we have to go to the soup kitchen to eat. Why? Like, why are we going to do this? Well, if you don't want to go do that, you must be but you must be better than everyone. It's like, we don't have to do that. Like, we have food in the cupboards. Like, this is taking away from people that genuinely need it. So it was like just crazy things like that. So that's the environment that I was in for like 7 years. So when I got out, I was alone in the city. I had no family. I had no friends because he had isolated me from having friends. He had isolated me from a lot of my family connections. So I was slowly trying to build that up, but they were not near me.
Right.
No one was near me. So then I still to this day kind of am in awe with myself that I got through that stage the way
Mhm.
that I did. Somehow, some way I did. Then I realized that 3 hours away in a different city, the city I'm in now, just a little bit south of here, where we are, I have a cousin, a distant cousin, who I didn't know was here. She's like my third or fourth cousin. I didn't know she was here. So thankfully, she took me under her wing. Her and her husband kind of helped me through, got me out of that city and got me into a safer spot away from him where he wouldn't know where I was. And he had no idea that I have this person here, nothing like that. So, um, and then, so then I do a bunch of healing, a lot of getting into life coaching.
So, like, talk to me about that bunch of healing portion. So, like, what did you do? Like